Well, John, focusing on the budget, long-term for the budget, not just FY 2012 but beyond, the city is looking at some other additional ways to augment some long-term needs within the budget. Talk about that for us.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces to this. One is I think we have a stewardship responsibility to really take a look at our long-term financial strategies and financial health. And we've been very fortunate in this community, in the city, to have had really top-notch financial management over the time. And but one of the things that we have found as a result of this recession, and as a result of some structural imbalances that we've really been working on and correcting over the last couple of years, is that we really have two things to take a look at. One is to create a stable budget into the future. We need to make sure that we're closing the financial gaps in our general fund, particularly for the current level of services that we're providing. And then the second question really is how do we ensure the protection of the community's investment in a variety of things like parks and recreation, our civic facilities, and then also how do we ensure the long-term viability of our public safety system. And that's really from prevention, intervention, enforcement, right up through the incarceration kinds of things, as well as ambulance transport and those kinds of things. So what we're trying to do is really start the discussion around the stable part of the budget, ensure that we're providing the current level of services, and then a sustainable budget of how do we ensure we're providing all the services and protecting those assets into the future.
Now, the one figure I heard, roughly $134 million in unfunded needs going out. How many years are we talking about?
That's really taking a look at over the next 6 years, our forecast, and recognizing that when we talk about unfunded needs, it really incorporates a couple of things. One is as I talk about protecting the assets that we have. For example, we want to make sure that the pools are properly maintained, that they're replaced when they need to be replaced, and some of those kinds of things. Same with park systems and development of parks. The other could be new services that we think would be appropriate for the community into the future, but there really hasn't been some of those decisions yet by the policymakers, the council on, is that the right mix of services going into the future. So the unfunded needs part can really be broken down into a couple places.
Okay. What about unfunded street repairs not covered by the bond that the people passed?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, Tom, of one that's worked well and I think will continue to work well. For decades, we've had a problem with maintaining our system, our road system. It has created a backlog, and the backlog had approached $160, $170 million. And so through a series of things, one of which was a gas tax that was implemented, work that's gone on at the state, and the bond that was passed a couple of years ago, we're starting to actually reduce that backlog. And so that's a great example of how we can actually ensure the long-term viability, in this case, of our road system. And so that bond will be expiring in FY13. And so we will have conversations with the council about the possibility of going out with an additional bond. One of the things that worked so well with that was that it was a very definitive amount for very specific projects. There's an oversight committee with that, very transparent. I think really good stewardship of community resources, and really starting us to create a sustainable way of maintaining our streets into the future. And we want to do those kinds of things with parks assets, recreation facilities, civic facilities, all of those kinds of things. And there could be a whole mix of solutions.
What kind of fees or augmentations may be coming up?
In the FY12 budget that I'll be presenting to the council next week, and will get distributed tomorrow, publicly distributed, our philosophy for the last 3 years has been we're not going to balance our budget with new fees and increased taxes, new or increased fees or taxes. And the FY budget is going to be the same thing. The proposal does not include any new or increased fees or taxes. And we recognize very much the situations we're currently in fiscally. And so what our strategy really has been is to become structurally viable, live within our means. What we've done is we've really reduced our organizational footprint over the last 3 years. We've eliminated 80 positions, we've reduced our fleet size, we've really worked on reducing our healthcare costs, and all of those things have allowed us to structurally change our budget, while at the same time, because of innovation and new ways of doing things, we've been able to maintain the services into the community. There have been some adjustments, but we have not had to implement draconian adjustments in order to balance our budget. So we've done some fundamental things in the past 3 years without resorting to new taxes and fees. Same thing for FY12. We're continuing to work on innovations, being efficient, being productive, and not recommending fees and tax increases or new fees or taxes for FY12. And then we're going to need to start the conversation for the long term, because there are some things we need to take a look at for the long term for a sustainable budget.
Can the city live within its means, making the assumption the economy will continue this slow rebound?
What's going to happen, what we'll see in the budget and that we've already sent out in the forecast, that we're anticipating a growing gap over the next couple of years, starting in really FY13. We've done some closure in FY12, and our strategies for the last couple of years have really worked. What we've said is we want to structurally change our footprint. We want to accumulate some cash in our savings account to allow us to transition and to be very thoughtful in the out years as the economy continues to fluctuate. And so that strategy has worked. And so it allows FY12 to be a kind of a transition year. But as we look at FY13, 14, 15, 16, there is a gap that we're going to have to figure out how to close. And it could be additional structural changes in the organization, which may result in different services being delivered. And so part of the real thoughtful conversation for the council is going to be, what is that package of services, both quantity and quality of services, how we deliver those, and then it also can be a conversation about revenue sources, but that's not the only part of the conversation.
Okay, last question for you, and having to do with building up the city's credibility as you go through these steps. And you mentioned the street bond, specific program with specific needs and specific projects.
Right.
If you carry that forward to other needs, is that maybe an approach the city should take?
I think absolutely it's an approach, because what it does is it's transparent, it's very accountable, it's a responsible way for us to manage those funds that the community has entrusted us with, and people can see the end result of that. So absolutely it's a great way to do it, and that's the model that will continue as we move down.